Welcome to episode 12 of Vox Pop. And this episode we have another listener, somebody that I've been speaking to on Twitter for a little while. He's also a Third Wednesday veteran. I think that might be fair to say, if there are such a thing as a veteran of Third Wednesdays yet. And has also got quite an interesting history, which I think you'll find to be quite useful. He has spent a career in market research and then, amongst other things, is now a successful writer, specialising to some extent in apocalyptic fiction, so or not, as the case may be these days. So, without further ado, hello, Jason Ayres.
Good afternoon, Sam. Thank you for inviting me on.
Well, you're very welcome. Very welcome. We had a little bit of a brief chat before we started recording, and we've had as some of the regular listeners will find very amusing, one or two IT glitches, which again were the computer's fault, not mine. But we are now hopefully recording, and everybody can hear us well. So, Jason, we spoke, I think, or we sort of bumped into each other on the Twitter sphere, didn't we? I think initially.
Yes, we did.
And I think, am I right in thinking, is it the Worcestershire Third Wednesdays that you go to, or do you go elsewhere in the?
Predominantly Worcestershire. I got to know Dick Dellingpole and his crew back at the start of this year, really, and during the latest lockdown, we were walking out on the Malvern Hills on Saturday mornings with a group of like-minded folk.
Right.
And then when the pubs reopened and the Third Wednesdays got going, we started meeting up on Wednesdays. Well, initially the Third Wednesday, which takes place in Ledbury, in Herefordshire, every month, though it has expanded to other Wednesdays as well. Well, nearly every Wednesday we find ourselves ensconced in a pub somewhere in Worcestershire.
Right.
Though I have attended some in other counties as well. There's a chap called Yuri on Twitter who runs one in Cheltenham, yes. And I've been to that one as well. So, the Third Wednesdays are a great innovation and a great place to find other people to reassure us that we haven't all gone mad.
Yeah, well, it does sometimes require that reassurance, doesn't it? I haven't been to one yet, but I'm promising myself I'm going to go to the one in December, whenever that. If it's the Third Wednesday, I don't know if it'll be the Third Wednesday in December, because obviously that takes us pretty close to Christmas, doesn't it? But
it'll be somewhere around the 17th, 16th, something like that.
Right. That's
so I'll probably get to meet you then in Ledbury.
No, that'll be good. I'm looking forward to it. I think there's a few people coming up from different parts of the world as well for that. So it'll be nice to Flora, who's been on this podcast, I think was planning to come up. So it will be good to see a few faces and what have you. I think I saw actually that Dick at the weekend posted some photos of a sort of a ramble across the top of Malvern Hills.
Yes, I was in that photo, as was my wife, as was my son, and as was my mother-in-law. So we had a multi-generational photo.
Fantastic! Oh, right, no, it looked nice. I was. You can actually, well, you wouldn't see my house, but you can see where my house is from the top of the Malvern Hills. So if you look north,
you can. The panoramic view from up there is quite remarkable, and we didn't even know if we were going to get up there, because when we woke up on Saturday morning, there was an absolute torrential downpour. But the Malvern Hills, this has happened a few times, but often we get up there and suddenly glorious sunshine, and it's an absolutely wonderful place to go. The air up the top is so fresh and cold, and there's no technology, and it's just somewhere where it's good for the soul just to get away from everything that's going on.
Well, it's when I go for a walk in the morning, I walk up the lane from where I am, and as soon as I'm 100 meters up the hill, I can see the Malvern Hills just standing out, because it is
Yeah.
an outcrop in the middle of a sort of a flat plain, isn't it? Really, so you can see it's a very obvious place. But I think as well, I used to live in Kimver when I was a child, and Kimver Edge is quite high, and they used to. I remember on the Silver Jubilee, they lit
A beacon.
a beacon. That's what I was thinking. Yeah,
Yes.
and Malvern must have been one of the beacons just before Kimver, I think. Billy
I
Clent,
do
I think.
I do recall the same thing. I lived in Oxfordshire at the time, but we went up on a hill. There's two things I remember about that day. One was the lighting of the beacon, and the other was collecting the 25 pence Silver Jubilee coin that they gave to all of the children.
I'd forgotten about that. Yes, yes, crikey. Oh well, it's obviously of a similar vintage, but so your background, originally market research, is that right?
Yes, I worked for around 15 years for a company called Nielsen, which may or may not be a familiar name. You'll normally see their name at the bottom of newspaper advertisements that quote data.
Right.
They are the largest market research firm in the world, and their head office in the UK was based in Oxford. And I had a client facing role there, which involved analysing data, presenting it to clients, lots of pretty graphs on the laptop, and playing with numbers all of the time. So it was something that I had a natural affinity for. And I left there in 2005, but obviously those skills stay with you, and it's very easy when looking in a newspaper or looking at something presented on the television to be able to pick holes in numbers that are being presented, or to see what sort of angle or spin they're putting on those numbers to get you to perceive them in the way that they wish you to perceive them.
Yes, I mean I've for a while now listening to. Well, I no longer listen to really much mainstream media at all, but I don't listen to the BBC. And one of the primary reasons for that, I used to be an avid listener of Today programme every morning. And I used to
Yes.
wait for years. I woke up to the Today programme and went to work listening to the Today programme. And whilst it was a little bit, it was a little left of where I was on most issues, it was, I felt, a fairly robust sort of presentation of the world affairs. But it must be 10 years ago since I've listened to the Today programme now. It just drove me mad in the end. So I felt I just was shouting at the radio all the time. But where I was going with that was that not so much statistics, but the way their phraseology works, which I've mentioned before on this podcast. Very clever, and I know it's done on purpose. They have house styles and particular ways of speaking. But the way they phrased, when they're presenting certain things that they were obviously of to their bias, it was a fact. It was presented as a fact. And then when it was something that was not of their bias, of the opposite, then it was just a claim. So, and unless you're listening to the English that's being used, it's easy for that to wash over you and just sort of, I think, slowly condition you. That, because these words it matters. These words, and when people are talking about things, if Labour are going to create 300,000 jobs in the first, this, that, and the other, or the Tories claim to be doing this, that, and the other within the first 3 months of it's. I mean, I suppose a lot of people probably get it, but I just struck a chord with me from the beginning. So statistic wise, I'm relatively numerate when it comes to figures, but it sounds to me like you work with them an awful lot, or have worked with them in the past. So do you want to give me an example of what you picked up on? I mean, presumably this is early on, when everything was first starting.
Yes, I mean, very early on, I could see, well, all the way through, really. I mean, to give a more a recent example, and just touching on the point you made, because you've made me think of something else that which when you talk about phraseology,
Mhm.
it's the way that they present numbers or figures in a way to get people to believe that it is a fact. But if you actually analyze the language, they're not saying it as if it's a fact. So um, let's take, for example, that if you were to say, we have this new medication which is proven to reduce symptoms by 50%, then that is a reasonable fact because they've said
Mhm.
proven. But what I find that they often will say is they will say it in a way that it's phrased, this new medication may reduce symptoms by up to 50%.
I see.
Now, there's two things in there. The use of the word may means nothing because that's not proving in any shape or form. And where they've used the phrase up to 50%, that could be anywhere between 0 and 50%. So what they're actually saying could be saying that it may reduce symptoms by 1%, because they've not given you any sort of factual evidence there at all. But because it's being said by an authoritative person on Radio 4, oh, I can't think of a name. What's that chap? Ferguson? Or somebody like him,
Yeah. Is he
who
still
is
authoritative? Is he? So-
yeah, who is wheeled out as the statistical expert um, on a regular basis, and people just accept it because it's the BBC, it's a known voice, somebody that they feel comfortable with, and um, if they were to actually look back over Ferguson's track record, they might not be so reassured, but because people do not do research in that way.
Well,
But
and also it's
yeah,
narrative, isn't it? If you've got a narrative to tell, which is,
yeah,
I think, where the BBC went a long time ago, they're not interested anymore in finding out the truth and then reporting it to the general public. What they seem to
yeah.
be interested in doing is teaching the general public where they're wrong and what they should be doing. That seems to be their
Yes,
raison d'etre these days.
yes. I mean, it's this whole tell people what to think, not how to think, which
Yeah.
is pervading all areas of life. But I mean, going back to the start of the pandemic and also in the years leading up to that, I would be, you hear a lot of talk about people who are awake or not awake or red or blue pilled. I would say that I was probably somewhere in the middle, semi awake. I, for many years, had become very cynical and skeptical of things that were being presented by the media. Though I did still, at that time, watch some television news, though I was beginning to find it quite unpalatable. When the pandemic first appeared, it was. I don't know if you can remember this because we all remember the furore and the lockdown and all of the panic. But if you can remember in the time leading up to that, it was quite low key to start off with, and they were
Yeah.
playing it down. And I was interested in what was happening because I think you mentioned at the start what I do for a living now is I write science fiction books, which predominantly in the area of time travel, but I have touched on various apocalyptic type scenarios, and pandemics is something that has always interested me ever since I watched a 1970s BBC series called Survivors, which deals with what happens to the people who are left behind when a deadly pandemic strikes. Now, the pandemic in that series wiped out 99% plus of the people, so that was a serious pandemic, and so I've often felt that if the world was going to end in some way, that could be the way that it could happen. And when this thing initially appeared, um, it caught my attention. It was, is this the big one? Um, but it became apparent quite quickly that it wasn't the big one. And we've had a few that were hyped up in the past, which came to nothing,
Yeah.
like the initial SARS and the swine flu, and we were starting to get information early on, probably by February, that it was highly infectious, but it wasn't particularly fatal. And I think even as early as the end of February, we were talking. I mean, the rate that we know now of survival overall is 99.8, but even then, I think they were saying 99% of people won't die from this. And also at that time, in those early days, the government and the media were very much downplaying it. I mean, I don't know if you remember, there was some images of Boris Johnson going around shaking hands with people at a factory about a few weeks before it happened.
Yeah, yeah. It was a couple of weeks before he went
Yeah,
down with it. Was it?
yeah. And then we had Chris Whitty coming on the TV. It seems incredible to say this now after all that's happened since, but he actually came across as quite a reasonable and intelligent man at that point, who was saying the majority of people aren't going to die from this. It's nothing to panic, nothing to worry about. And I was fully going along with that. Some people were saying, "Oh, this is quite serious," and clearly it wasn't, and that was the message that we were being given. So, my guess as to what was going to happen at that time was we were going to have this nasty thing. It was going to be like a bad flu season. We take precautions. There was all that washing hands and stuff like that, which seemed reasonable. And then suddenly it just went crazy. I believe that it was the aforementioned Ferguson model that spooked the government and people into taking action. And suddenly everybody was acting as if it was the big one.
Yeah, I mean, it did seem to. I think probably. I mean, going over a bit of old ground here, but I think when Johnson went down with it, and it was reported as him going into hospital and being, on death's door, I think that probably shook a bit, like sort of when Diana died. And I think there are some people you just don't expect because they're celebrities, you don't expect them to die, especially when they're relatively young. And so I think the fact that he went down with it, I mean, at the time, some people were saying, "Is he really gone down with it?" And I remember at that time thinking, "Don't be ridiculous. Of course, he's ill and all the rest of it." I still think he was, but I have to say, after the passing of time, I wouldn't put anything past this government in terms of painting a picture.
No, it's the government and the media. And I said earlier on that I had grown increasingly cynical about the news and what was being reported. But I think this was at the point where I took the full red pill and became aware that everything we were being told and the way it was being presented was being manipulated. And we know now that that is true because of all the revelations about Sage and their minutes and the excellent book by Laura Dodsworth, State of Fear. I don't know if you've read it.
I have.
Yeah, it completely describes what I suspected was happening at the time. And it took me, that was the point where I did cut ties with traditional news and media, because I could see that it was no longer news. It was just a mouthpiece for whatever message that they wanted to get across.
Yeah, I mean, I think what for me, I think there were two. I remember in February thinking we're going to get locked down because I, like everybody else, watched China and thought, well, it seemed madness what was happening in China. It's absolutely unbelievable. The fact that it's happened in other countries now, and look at Australia and places like that, is really, I don't think many people, if you were to go back in time and then tell them that, I don't think they'd believe what's happened. But I watched that, and I was supposed to be travelling out to that part of the world, so I was keeping quite a close eye on it, and I decided in the end not to go because I thought I'm sure they're going to close down, in that region, and I'm going to get stuck out there. So I'm glad I didn't, because I would have got stuck out there. But
Yeah.
so I was following it from February, thinking we're going to get locked down, and then about 2 weeks before, or a week before the lockdown, it became very obvious they were talking about it, and so I went out, made various preparations and what have you, and then of course, and I think other people were as well, and then it all happened. And then it was that 3 weeks to
Yeah.
flatten the curve thing, which, to be honest, I could see the logic in that too. I thought, well, obviously the big danger here, it's not a particularly lethal sickness, but yes, we've got limited beds, and therefore it could be that people just stack up in the ambulance bays, and people die because they can't get what we thought at the time was respirators, wasn't it? But
Yes.
treatment basically. But it strikes me that if you're poorly with it now, nearly 2 years in, they are still telling you stay at home. Call us if your lips go blue.
Yeah.
So where's the treatment? No wonder there's
Well,
hospital admissions.
there was a lot that we know now that we didn't know back then, and I can understand why people would support that first lockdown.
Yeah.
But there were things that there were a couple of things that particularly struck me. The first was the reporting of the cases and the deaths in the early days. I don't know if you will remember, but we didn't actually have any sort of testing at all, really. Then the PCR test hadn't come along, and they were diagnosing the cases more or less on people that were coming into hospital ill.
Yeah.
So the case numbers were actually quite low. And what was happening, we'd been told, that there was 99% survival rate, but this daily tally was being put on the television. I don't think anyone's mentioned this before, so hopefully this is something new. And it would say something like there are now 5,000 cases and we've had 500 deaths. And people were just looking at those bare numbers and doing a calculation in their heads and coming to their own conclusion that 10% of people were dying from the disease.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the truth was that there were tens or hundreds of thousands of people that weren't being categorized as cases because they weren't, there was no test to diagnose them. Whereas now we have the opposite problem where we have, so much testing that we are getting ridiculously high number of cases. So the situation in March last year was way worse than it is now. But we were recording we weren't even testing more than 10,000 people a day. And now we're regularly reporting 50,000 cases every day out of 1 million tests. So you look at a graph of cases and people, without a great grasp of statistics, are probably even concluding now that things are worse than they were then. But certainly they were inferring a high death rate at that time because of the low number of cases.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah.
And when you start talking to people, you see, this is where I started to become frustrated because people were completely in awe of all this, and they had no grasp of the actual statistics at all. I asked a member of my family who shall remain nameless because I don't want to embarrass the person in question. A few months into this, so probably last summer, what percentage of people did she think that got COVID died from it?
Mm-hmm.
And she said between 40 and 50%.
Wow.
Which I found absolutely unbelievable. And this person isn't completely doesn't have their head in the sand. In fact, since then, I've shown her enough videos and other information that she is on board now with the situation. But she wasn't then, and I think many people, particularly elderly ones, who only ever watch the BBC or read, a paper they've taken for 50 years because that consume media in that traditional sense, must have been absolutely terrified out of their wits.
Yeah.
And it's easy for us to say, oh well, go and do your research, you should go and find out the truth. But if we're talking about a 75-year-old person who's never really used the internet and has never done anything any other way, you can't really expect anything different.
No, absolutely. I remember. It's a little bit embarrassing, but I think a lot of us were the same. I remember the first week or so, first couple of weeks of lockdown. I went out to do the shopping, and I came back. I took everything out of the bags. I remember taking everything out of bags and putting it on the table, and then I don't think I actually wiped down all the stuff that I bought, but I took it all out of bags, put the bags in the bin, washed my hands. I went through a sort of a regime,
a ritual.
because because at the time you think, well, is it? Nobody knew how dangerous it was going to be and all the rest of it. So, and of course, it has killed people. So, it's everyone had to be. Everyone was being careful, and there was that quite surreal. All the roads were empty, and there was nobody out, and it just seemed a bit like one of these films that you see on the TV. Yeah.
But that ritual that you were talking about there, some people are still doing that.
Yeah. I find that amazing.
Yeah. You see them at the supermarket. To be fair, the supermarkets have got a lot better. If you remember at the start, we were all standing on spots queuing to go in, and a lot of the fear factor has been taken away from the supermarkets, but you still see people queuing up and wiping down the trolley and all of that stuff. And yes. I wonder if some people have become so, they're so in these routines, whether they will ever stop now.
I actually think exactly the same. I think there's two. There's obviously more than two groups, but I think there's two primary groups I've noticed. There's people middle age and up who are genuinely still quite scared, and as you say, I'm not sure that they'll ever really get over it. And walking around, there's some in my local supermarket I see from time to time. They've got the blue rubber gloves on. They've got quite significant masks on. They look petrified. It's normally in couples, and they sort of their heads are down, and they sort of scurry around, trying to keep away from everybody. And I think that's that's really sad that they're that frightened. But there's them. And then there's the other type, which is people under 35, probably under 30, who have got some sort of, matching, seriously high-quality mask on. And it's almost like a fashion accessory. And I think they're LARPing. I think, live-action role-play. I think they're kind of... It's a combination of virtue signalling and kind of living the drama. Wow, this is really exciting.
Yeah, there's the virtue signalling. There's a huge element of that. I think there are three different... I've identified three different types of people that wear masks. So we've got the genuinely terrified. You've got the virtue signalers. So these will also be the ones that will jump on any other bandwagon going. So they will have been the ones out banging the pots and pans. They'll change their social media thing to a rainbow or a black square or whatever the fashionable thing is of the week. And then you've got the other group, which are the ones who are doing it because they don't want to get told off, for want of a better expression.
Yes.
I can give a couple of examples of that. There's a couple that I often have a drink with on a Friday night, and they are semi on board with what's going on. You know, they didn't agree with lockdown, and they've been against that, but they did conform to wearing masks where they had to, and they've taken the jabs. But after the mask mandate was lifted on the 19th of July, we went to the pub the Friday evening, and we were just going in the door, and he started putting his mask on. And I said, what are you doing that for? It's not a requirement anymore. And he said, oh, well, you know, people sometimes get a bit funny, don't they? And it's that attitude that is the real problem. And I've had that with another person that I met in a supermarket, and she knew that I wasn't a mask fan. And when she saw me to come over to talk to me, she pulled it down because she knew I didn't approve of them. So she was doing the same thing in reverse, really. It's like, I'm wearing my mask, I don't want it told off, but oh, I've just seen Jason. He'll say something if he sees me with my mask on. So she pulled it down. And I think there's this desperate need for social conformity and approval amongst people, which is why they all lined up to put them on in the first place. I mean, going back to last summer, well, there's two things really. When they brought the mask mandate in on July the 24th last year, I couldn't believe that almost 100% conformity.
Yeah.
That surprised me. What surprised me even more, and probably the most depressing day of this entire debacle, was on July the 19th this year, when the mandate was lifted. And I and many other optimistic people confidently predicted that we would go out to the supermarkets on that day, and we would see a sea of happy, smiling faces. We knew some people would still wear masks, but we thought, you know, maybe it would be 50-50, something like that. And I went out that Monday morning, and I went into Aldi, and I was the only one in there without a mask on. They all still had them on.
Yeah. I thought 50-50. I was expecting 50-50, and I went out the day after on the 20th, and my local supermarket, which I only go to really because they've been quite good in the pandemic through not broadcasting government propaganda over the tannoy every 5 seconds, which is Waitrose, and everybody were in there on the 19th. I think it was probably me and one other, and everyone else was wearing masks. But of course, the media, and as I don't know if you've heard my conversation with Ronan Meyer, but the media and the unions and have all been desperately keen to keep this thing going. And so that, you know, if they're still because the only thing the media have ever done that's been in any way critical of the government, as far as I can see, is saying, aren't you're being too lax? Why are you opening the country up again? Why are you allowing, you know, you would think they would be looking at it the other way, but no, they've been.
Yeah. Well, that was something that really at the very start, when the press conferences, it was, you know, the questions I was asking were, should we be locking down? When's the lockdown going to finish? How much is this going to cost the country? And all we ever got were these people like Laura Koonsberg and whoever. Do you think we should have locked down sooner? Do you think we should have locked down harder? Do we need tougher measures? And I couldn't believe I was hearing this. And the worst thing about it was my neighbours and people that I knew, they were all, because these things were being said on the TV, they were parroting them back at me, because I did attempt to have conversations with people in the early days. Say, do you think there's something a bit odd about all of this? But they were just completely on board. And there was a point, I think all of us who had our doubts about this had a point last spring where we felt completely isolated, and it was like, am I going mad? Am I the only one? because we were completely, we'd been locked down. People couldn't go to work, couldn't go to the pub. It wasn't something you could have a chat with
Yeah.
anybody about. We were completely isolated. I mean, I'm fortunate that my wife and both my kids are on the same page.
All right.
And I know a lot of people don't have that luxury, and it has been absolute hell for some people. And I know couples that have split up over it.
That's horrendous, isn't it? It
It
really
is.
is.
And this seemed to go on. And so okay, well, we had the sanctuary in the family. Nobody in my extended family could see it. None of my neighbours could see it. I wasn't getting anything from the TV, and it was, well, where do you turn? I had one or two other friends that I was in contact with who lived in other parts of the country who seemed to be on board, but it was very much the minority. So, is anyone going to say anything about this? And then I discovered a few dissenting voices. The first one I really saw was an article that was written in The Spectator by a Dr. John Lee. I don't know if you come across him,
I know the name.
expressing doubts about the lockdown very much right at the start.
Right.
And I thought he's talking quite a lot of sense. And The Spectator actually seemed to be quite good at the start. They were questioning it, though they've been more disappointing since. There were other, so I started to look elsewhere, and I wasn't listening to BBC, so I listened to Talk Radio, who are hit and miss. I know a lot of people consider them controlled opposition, but there were people coming on there. Peter Hitchens was one of the early ones, and also Neil Oliver, who had a weekly slot on there, and they I felt that they were asking and saying the things that I wanted to say, but a lot of them were getting a lot of stick for it. Suddenly we seem to be in this the cancel culture that we had seen pervade other areas of entertainment and such, like, of people being, you don't have the right opinions, then you're going to lose your job, or we're not going to book you for any gigs. That the same thing seemed to be happening over this.
Well, I think the other thing is that I just don't understand. We all like to think that we're intelligent people, don't we? Everybody, we all like to think we're good drivers. We all like to think we're intelligent people, all the rest of it. And I'm sure we can all be idiots from time to time, but critical thinking, and this, I was addressed this yesterday, in fact, on Twitter. It seemed to hit a note with quite a lot of people. We seem to have been split into two groups, really. There's the people that just follow everything, and they follow every word of the experts, the scientists, and as you say, they repeat word for word the phrases that you've heard on the radio, for example, or even in adverts, and you think you're just repeating word for word what the government have told you is happening, or what BBC told you last night. There's those people. Then there's the other people, like us, I guess, who even if all the science and everything, you think, right, okay, the science that's being presented to me, and I haven't seen anything else, seems to be telling me this. Even though that might persuade you one way, I mean, obviously we've all seen another argument, so that's not necessarily the case now. But I would look at it and go, why are they trying to frighten us so much, and why are they trying to be so coercive with everything they do, and why are they shutting everybody down? Anybody who veers slightly off track, they're shut down. To me, and I think to a lot of people, that just makes me suspicious. I just go, well, hang on a minute. Well, why are you doing that?
This is the point where you start to think that there must be an ulterior agenda. And you don't want to be labelled a conspiracy theorist, because that's the slur that gets thrown out, or a tinfoil hatter. But of course, that's all been planted in the minds of that first group of people that you mentioned as well.
Well, the denier, whether
Yeah,
whether it's
yeah,
Holocaust denier, which is obviously where it comes
yeah,
from, to climate denier, to
yeah.
COVID denier, to lockdown denier, which is a really
You're
bizarre one.
you're simply not permitted to dissent. And this body of people that, as you say, just repeat stuff and go along with everything. It appears to me that they actually want to have their lives run for them and to be told what to do by the government to keep them safe. And I don't know if it's our mentality. I just cannot see how anybody can live their life that way. It's not living.
No, no. But as you say, there are a lot of people that seem very keen to, very happy to give up. And this is the other thing that gets me: the amount of people that go, "Oh, freedom! What does it matter?" I've again on Twitter there was a great thread yesterday I read on this, but Towney, I think it is at Towney, saying if you all those people that are saying what freedoms have you lost? I could still go to the shops now. Everything's back to normal. And he just listed through all the little things you can't do, and the big things too. So,
Yeah,
for example, there's hundreds of thousands of people that we know of that are likely to lose their jobs because they're going to be mandated to take and register the fact that they've had a vaccine, and if they don't, they're going to lose their jobs. Well, if you believe that that's going to stop at health workers, then you're very naive, because that's going to just be extended and extended and extended.
you've only got to look at what's happening elsewhere in the world.
Yeah,
And yeah, everything gets extended, like you say, and it's all working towards one goal, clearly, um, which in my eyes, and I probably figured this out over a year ago, it all comes back. All the roads lead to digital ID,
yeah, yeah.
and I'm convinced that that is what they are pushing towards. I'm not saying that the entire pandemic happened for that reason, but I think there are a lot of opportunist people who want to push certain ways for people to live their life. They saw how compliant people were last year and saw an opportunity to advance their cause. And it just seems that everything that happens, I mean, we've predicted, we've been saying, a year ago, this is what they're going to do next. This is what they're going to do next. This is the next logical step. And it happens.
This is the most frustrating thing, and this won't be new to people listening to this, but the fact that it's become almost a trope in itself. The fact that he's like, oh right, what's the difference between conspiracy theory and reality? About 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally is about 6 weeks now, isn't it? Something comes up. I mean, I said probably about 6-8 weeks ago, I said, well, the next thing's going to be that there's a new variant, and it's being spread amongst the children. When they announced they were going to start vaccinating children. Obviously, there's been a bit of a waiver on the vaccinations there because there's been a lot of resistance they weren't expecting. So I know some children are getting vaccinated, but it's a small, I think it's about 10%, isn't it? Something like that. But and now we're starting, sadly, to see some children, certainly plenty more in the States, but also some children here that are being taken ill and getting myocarditis and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And of course, and I think I saw yesterday it was a press report, it wasn't a government statement, but a press report suggesting, seeding, if you like, the idea that the children were being were now the subject of, they were both a disease carrying vector, but also that they were likely to be the producer of the next variant, which I wouldn't be surprised if in a few weeks we have that isn't something that's being said openly. Which I mean, I don't know if that happens. Then I'm afraid I've got no confidence in them anyway. But I think that's very nefarious. The fact that they're prepared to give children this untested, trialed medication, which seems to work reasonably well with older people, I think, from what I can see. If they're vulnerable already, then the risk-reward the risk benefit analysis is not a, it's
Yeah.
more sensible, isn't it? If you're over 75 and you've got type 2 diabetes, well, yeah, perhaps it's a good idea to take it, because you're at a reasonably significant risk. Although it's still not massive, is it? It's still in the 90% that you're going to survive. I think it's still 90% survival rate.
Yeah.
But I could argue that, because my
Well,
mother's 80 and she's a bit poorly. Yes, she's had all the vaccines, and yep, fair. I'm not going to argue her out of it. But young people under 30, I think you've got more chance of being hit by lightning than you have
yeah.
of being
The
ill.
fact that this was even contemplated for children itself is unbelievable, and the fact that we are just steamrolling on with it, despite uh, you know what we know, what we hear, and yes, a lot of it is anecdotal evidence, but there are reporting systems in place, and we can see what's going on. And I don't want to say anything that will compromise your podcast, but all of these, shall we say, short illnesses and such like that we hear about, it can't all be coincidence.
No.
But the general public seems, in many cases, completely unaware of it. Whether or not that's because they are unaware of it or not, I don't know. I think many are, but many choose to self-censor, perhaps the same ones that wear the masks in the shop because they don't want a fuss. But
Yeah.
my son tells me, and this is only one school and one class, that he reckons less than half had it the day they came in to do it,
Right.
which does give me some hope that at least 50% of parents are uncomfortable with this. However, another parent in the same school who attends our Stand in the Park group said that there is a lot of peer pressure among the children, and that there were cases of some children who wanted it and their parents didn't want them to have it, who were forging the parent's signature on the form without it ever being taken home, which is very concerning because children are very impressionable.
Well, there's a website called Wikihow, and it's, as the name suggests, it's like an encyclopedic website that you can search on how to do anything. It's sort
Yeah,
of people adding to it all the time. And I saw this shared on, again, probably shared on Twitter, but it was a very well put together. It might even have been governmental. How to first of all, saying that if you wanted to have it and you were under 16, then you could have it and your parents couldn't say no. Secondly, saying you don't have to have a big row with your parents. You could just, they would basically lie to them.
yeah,
Now, you've got that happening, and then at the same time, you've got, for example, Cressida Dick, right at the beginning of the lockdown, making it very clear that, well, we haven't got enough police officers to enforce this. We're going to have to rely on the good citizens to police the bad ones. So she was basically inciting, as far as I could see, people to bully other people, which
yeah.
from a police head chief of police is outrageous, and that never got any criticism. It's this really unpleasant governmental license which is being given out to all the usual people that love to have a little bit of power, and also to subvert, as you say, the child-parent relationship, which is disgusting from a government.
It is, but it's not unprecedented in history.
Yeah,
We saw it in the 20th century in certain regimes in Europe,
yeah,
and many of the tactics and things that have been used over this past year or two have been tried and tested in the past. And I think people just simply don't realize or don't believe that it's happening, or realize that they're a part of it. It's it is unbelievable. You can't, I'm really careful what I say to my neighbors now, because they I think they would be like that. I saw
Yeah.
curtains twitching from their windows when people were round at the door at our house during one of the lockdowns.
Mhm.
And I could imagine what they were, the sort of things they were probably saying. Um, it's it's very difficult. I talk to my neighbours, and they're lovely people. When the kids were younger, they used to play in the garden, have a drink in the back garden in the summer. But I speak to them now, and I was over there a few weeks ago, and the chap came over. I was talking to his wife, and he was like, "Oh, I've just been down to B&Q. I couldn't believe it. I was the only one in there with a mask on." And he was looking at me, to me, because he wanted a reaction from me. He
Yeah.
wanted me to endorse what he was saying. He wanted me to say something like, "Oh, that's terrible, isn't it?" They're always seeking his reassurance, but
Yeah.
I didn't give him the satisfaction.
Well, I think you get this all the time, don't you? And it is almost like it's a kind of hysteria and enjoying the drama, and it's almost like a shared. It's a bit like when you have, and not that I'm into football, but when you have the World Cup every 4 years or whatever,
Yeah,
and everybody talks about football. Like I find it really tiresome because I'm not into football, but
yeah,
and everyone puts a scarf on the car or
yeah,
something, and it's almost it's almost like a lot of people have. I think from the banging the pans at the beginning,
yeah.
it's almost like a we're all in this together, a kind of a wartime thing. Which
It's tribal.
interestingly, yeah,
It's
exactly,
tribal. And your football example, I mean, you see it in the crowd. If you're at a football match and you are surrounded by all supporters of the same team, you're part of that tribe, and it is a similar mentality.
Well, it's interesting. I've seen a fantastic video that was going around. I don't know if you've seen it. Of there's a waiting room full of people. It's all been set up. So
Yeah,
there's one person in the waiting room. I think it's for the doctors, and they don't realise it's set up. So they're all sat there, and there's probably 12 people there. And then a buzzer goes, and everybody stands up. And she's sat down reading a book, so she looks around and sort of puzzled. And then everyone sits down. And then the next time, 30 seconds later, the buzzer goes again. Everyone stands up. So she puts a book down and stands up.
yeah,
Have you seen this video?
yes, I have. Yeah,
And basically it goes through. Everybody leaves the room, so everyone's gone. And then the buzzer's still going, and she's on her own, and she still stands up on her own. And then somebody, I'm only saying this for everybody else who's listening, and then
yeah.
somebody else comes in and sits down next to her. So there's now two people in there. The buzzer goes, and she stands up, and he looks at her and goes, "What are you doing?" And she says, I don't know, but everyone stands up when the buzzer goes off. Then the buzzer goes off again 30 seconds later, so they both stand up. And you think, well, that says a lot about human nature.
Yeah, I think if I was in that situation, I was the second guy that you described. You said, "Why are you standing up?" I wouldn't stand up though, because well, we wouldn't, would we?
No, I
But
don't think we would most of the
but a
time
lot
anyway.
of no, a lot of people have done. But I think those of us that wouldn't stand up, but we all do have certain characteristics. We're critical thinkers, but we I don't know. I am quite independently minded, and I've noticed there's quite a lot of people like us who are self-employed
Yes.
because perhaps the one reason why I became self-employed was because I found the conformity of the office and the workplace was not for me.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
imagine it must be quite, I can't imagine working for a firm now, because even when I left there in 2005, there was the signs of virtue signaling and such like. I can imagine it's probably a lot worse now.
I can't imagine. Well, if this critical race theory that's knocking around now,
Yeah,
if somebody, I used to balk and be that awkward. I mean, I haven't worked for somebody for a long time, but when I was in my late 20s, say, and I was working for a big corporate, beer bottle, or whatever, and we used to get personnel would say, "Oh, you've all got to come down to this or that one day seminar on lifting boxes or something, and you just be
Yeah.
like, oh my god, really? I've worked off my feet. I'm doing 70 hours a week, and I've got to go and spend an afternoon in a 4-star hotel on the M6 learning how to lift a box.
Yeah.
So I was always the one in the corner, sort of frowning and being miserable. Because
Yeah.
so if
Yeah.
it was
It
critical
was.
race
Yeah.
theory, I think I'd be probably arrested.
But I mean, the way the culture is now, you've got to conform. I mean, you've only got to look at the taking of the knee for sports people. I mean, there was that cricketer last week. I don't know if you picked up on
Yes,
that.
South African was he?
Yeah, and he didn't want to do it. And there was such a furore over it. And then the worst thing you can do in this situation, I think, is cave in. And he just then issued a groveling apology the next day and said he was going to do it from now on, which is a real cop out.
Yeah. It's harder for him because being South
Yeah,
African, South Africa obviously has a history to deal with. But that said, you would think he's bright enough to realise, well, this is a big thing. If I'm going to take a principled stance here,
yeah,
I need to take it, and I need to decide whether I'm going to explain myself or whether I'm just going to say I'm not doing it. And then you have
yeah.
to stick by it, don't you? Because he must have known that his career was on the line if he does something
Yes,
like
well,
that.
I mean, a lot of people's careers have been on the line in all sorts of spheres, haven't they?
Yeah, yeah.
I
It's
do have the utmost admiration for people in the public eye who won't cave in to whatever the orthodoxy is. But we are so dangerously moving towards a society where, in order to get anywhere in any field, you have to have certain opinions, you have to say the right things, you have to display the right things. Anybody starting out in sport or entertainment or music now will have to follow these rules from the very beginning, because you could even be called out for something you tweeted when you were 15.
oh god, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I, I think we are creating a very bland world where everything is the same in so many ways. And one of the things that's happened during the pandemic is small independent businesses have suffered at the hands of big business. And, it's hastened the demise of the high street. I don't want to walk to a town where I've got a choice of Starbucks or Costa Coffee,
Yeah.
and there are no independent greengrocers, butchers, or any of that left. And the way the world's going, it's one huge bland ball of everything is the same. And I think it was the amusing thing is that there's talk of diversity, and we need more diversity. Well, what we're actually doing with the world is making it less and less diverse.
Exactly, exactly. It is because, well, this is the whole point of globalization, isn't it? And I was
Yeah,
listening on the radio. It must have been talk radio. That's the only place I do listen from time to time. And
yeah,
they were that point was being made, and also the fact that they were talking about labour costs and actually, I'll tell you what it was. I think it was Hearts of Oak, which is the podcast, which is worth listening to. But he was talking about the fact that at somewhere along the line, the idea that nationhood and I mean, the conversation is never had now. When we had the HGV driver shortage, alleged, that suddenly seems to have cured itself. But when we had that, it was all about, well, we need to get more drivers in from Romania, or we need to issue more visas, or we could train some more drivers, but they want a big pay rise, and the point was made. Well, we didn't always used to think in those simple terms. It used to be, well, what does the nation need? Who do when we take the census, we work out from that how we plan for the future, and how many people go to university and how many people go into the trades, and have we got enough people to build houses? And okay, I'm all for open market, and you want people to set their own rates of pay based on what they're worth in the marketplace, but it wasn't boiling down to treating people like a business resource. And that had not properly occurred to me until they made the point. And it was that people now are not talked about as people or as citizens or as subjects in this country. They're talked about as just another resource. And if you can get that resource from Romania or from Bangladesh, then let's bring them in from there. And sod the people that are already living here. And I thought that was a really good point, an old-fashioned conservative point, if you like, that has been lost in this sort of globalized economic, the way we look at everything from a business perspective.
Yes, I quite agree. And then they don't foresee the problems that it's going to create in the future.
Yeah.
So part of the reason why there are shortages in care homes and places like that is because many of them went home during the pandemic. I know that from a lot of the places like the Philippines, I believe there's a lot that work in care homes.
Yeah.
And if we're not training our own people, we're just bringing people in. What happens when we can't get those people? Or exactly. They go somewhere else. There's no forward planning, is there? No. They don't look at how we're going to develop this over 5 or 10 years. It's just, let's just do a quick fix now.
Well, this is it. I mean, it does boil down to, I think, probably two things. The first thing is that the media go for the gotcha. So politicians can't explain a subtle plan. Because the media just want to catch them out on the gotcha. So I think that's definitely relevant. And then politicians, for that reason, have been conditioned to just be short-term thinking, just thinking, how am I going to make myself look good this week? How do I keep my job? Yeah. You know, and
I think that is an interesting point, because when it comes to the whole subject of climate change, you look at how Boris Johnson bangs on about doing this by 2030 and this by 2035, and it's the fashionable thing, isn't it, to go on about net zero, carbon, climate change, etc. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, because it's a big win for him. He can say all of this stuff. He's not going to be around when the time comes to deliver it. He's in a win-win situation. He's saying what he thinks everybody wants to hear. But come 2035, when the whole thing's in complete disarray and it hasn't worked because they didn't cost it properly, or, you know, the resources they were going to invest in come to nothing, and we've got no energy because they've invested it into the wrong types of energy. You know, he won't be in charge of the country then. Yeah,
I mean, I think the fact as well is that whilst you know 2030 or COP26 and 2030 and 2050 and all these different dates, they're not. 2030 is not far away now. It's only 8 years away. Just over 8 years away. So I think as well, given the immense targets he's set for things like net zero and what he's expecting everybody to do, I think people are starting to. I hope people are starting to wake up to the fact that what this is actually going to do is put us back possibly over 100 years in terms of our quality of life, our how we live. You know, we're going to be in cold houses. We're not going to be travelling. We're not going to be. People are going to be local. Vast majority of people won't have transport. They won't have a car. Everyone keeps saying, "Oh well, you know, electric cars. We'll all have electric cars. They'll get cheaper as they build more." Well, first of all, we haven't got the lithium supplies to produce all these cars, and secondly, how are we going to charge them all? We can't even guarantee we can have electricity for our houses this winter. So when everybody is on electric heating, and everybody has got electric cars, and everybody is running 5G Internet of Things, which is increasing power draw by 20 or 30% on each house, how are we going to sustain all of this? It's just not going to happen. The fact is, we're going to have an elite of people driving around in their Teslas, travelling on private jets, and then we're going to have the rest of us mugs
Yeah.
You know, uh, eking a living in our pod, either in a city or completely divorced from society in a hut in the woods. Not a
Yeah.
very appealing future.
Uh, and it's also worth pointing out that while we're doing all of this, other countries, such as China, are still merrily burning away their coal and becoming ever more competitive
Yeah,
against us.
and laughing at us all the
Yeah, and
way to the
laughing at
bank.
us.
I mean, I had a little, as you do on Twitter, I had a little exchange on Twitter with some American person who I'm guessing was probably quite a bit younger than me, and she was going. It was all about COP26, and she was going on about it has to happen. The planet's going to die. We need to all the normals again, repeating exactly what's
Yeah,
been said to her through school and everything, and I just replied with tweets sent by my iPhone, produced in China, in a factory, powered by coal.
yeah, I
You know,
know.
it's
But
just ugh.
but again, it's the same as with the COVID. When you try to point these things out, it's just fingers in the ears time. They don't want to hear any inconvenient truths that are going to destroy their side of the argument. And
Yeah,
their side of the argument is not very strong in a
no.
lot of these cases.
So, Jason, we've been touching there on climate change, but also we started with COVID. So we've had a fairly full couple of years in terms of calamities that are supposedly happening. And whether or not, however you feel about climate change and how, whether it's happening, whether we're responsible for it, whether we can do anything about it, I think what I've noticed is that the way that it's being presented to us and the way that it's having an impact, people are already talking about the likelihood of having climate lockdowns, which I find very worrying and totally illogical. But then also, if you look at it, you look at these vaccine passports and tests and everything else. If you want to travel, I would say within the next 6 months, I think if you want to travel abroad, in most scenarios, you're going to have had the vaccine and have a passport proving that fact, which is very disappointing for me because I have no intention of doing either. But so we've got the vaccine passport, but I know we'd talked about digital IDs. That's something I think we both share. Where do you think the vaccine passport is going to go? What's with your writer's head on, with your sort of imagination in full flow? Where do you think Why do you think the vaccine passport's been introduced, and what's it going to become?
Okay, well, I think that foreign travel will possibly be the least of our worries ongoing. Uh, you talked about climate change lockdowns. The whole purpose of the vaccine passport, as far as I can tell, is to force people to get this app on their smartphone, which can be expanded to all manner of other things. Now, I believe this has been coming for a while, and the campaign to get the app has been preceded by what I perceive to be a push to force everybody, in the first instance, to get a mobile phone, and in the second instance, to become dependent on apps. So, just to give you some examples of where this has been coming from, I've noticed over the last couple of years in particular, that if you want to have to fill in any sort of online form for anything at all, so say to update your medical records, to sign up for a bank account, anything like that, as you know, you fill in an online form, you've got to put in your name, date of birth, those type of details.
Mm.
And one of the fields that they always have is for your phone number. Now, one of the things that's happened in many cases is that phone number now begins with a field which where the numbers 0 and 7 are locked in. So you can no longer give them a landline number. and the field is one of them that's marked with an asterisk to be compulsory. So I cannot update my medical records now, and I cannot update my bank details without providing an '07 number. So that is effectively saying we are at the point where we consider that everybody should have a mobile phone. Right. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing I've noticed is the pushing of the app. And I don't just mean the NHS app, I mean the app for anything. And you may have noticed this as well, that every time you go onto any sort of online website, again, it could be bank, it could be food, anything else. I do everything on my laptop because I work at home. I've got the desk in front of me. But almost without fail, always it's, have you considered getting our app? Oh, if you sign up for our app, you can get an extra 10,000 loyalty points, or it's so much easier if you use the app. And I know, for example, the mobile phone company that I use, their online website is really difficult to navigate, and they're pushing you towards the app. And to give an example where it became necessary, I avoid, where possible, ordering food from chain restaurants or going to any. We can come on to that as well, because I try and live a kind of independent lifestyle. But occasionally I do need to order from one. And it was my son's birthday a couple of months ago, and he wanted pizza from one of the well-known pizza delivery chains for the evening. So I attempted to order it online using their website, and it was just impossible. The website was there, but it kept falling over. I was putting things in, it wouldn't accept it. So I rang up the store, and they said, sorry, we don't take orders over the phone anymore. You have to use the app. So reluctantly, I was forced to download their app and put it on my phone and use it. Otherwise, my son wouldn't have got what he wanted for his birthday meal. But I'm seeing more and more of this. So we have a situation where they are trying to get this mindset in people that you've got to have a smartphone, you've got to have apps, or you're not going to get on in life or be able to do the things that you want to do. Now, the NHS app and the digital pass is the next logical step in that, and I believe it's going to progress on to other things. And to tie into your climate change lockdown, the app can be built to control all manner of things that we do. One of the things that we hear talked about a great deal is the consumption of meat, or alcohol, or anything else that could be seen as good for your health or good for the planet, could eventually be built into this app.
Yeah. So you can't, well, and also, of course, the critical thing here is banking or money, digital money, which
Yes.
Rishi Sunak was talking about the other day. I mean, this is a reality. It's going to happen.
Yes.
And once you've got digital money, and there's some people on podcasts who have done some great podcasts on this. James Denningpole spoke to, and I forgot the name again, double barrel name. She's an ex...
Catherine Austin Fitz.
That's the one, yeah. Ex-federal, US federal government housing, I think she was in. And she's hit the nail on the head perfectly. But once you've got digital money, they could do all sorts of things. You could have, as in they're doing this in China already, your money, you have credits on your phone or on your account, which is accessed through your phone, and your money expires over time.
Yes.
So you have a certain period of time to spend it. You can't spend it, as you say, with meat. Well, you can only buy 200 grams of meat a week.
Yeah.
And
it will be like
more.
It will be like rationing.
Yeah, which, funnily enough, they were talking about this morning. Yes. Prince Charles was mentioning it this morning.
And and
Joanna Lumley. Yeah.
And of course, this won't be for everybody, as we know. But I don't want to go down the whole them and us conversation. But we know how that works. And I think the danger of digital currency coming in is very real. And I've listened to many podcasts on the subject, and there's many people that believe that the way they will do it is by effectively destroying the existing currencies,
Yep.
which, if they wanted to do so, they've certainly been doing a good job of going about it this last couple of
Well,
years.
the WEF and all of that side of things, which I've looked at a lot of their videos from very
Yeah.
early on, actually from March, April 2020. I was looking at, that's when I really woke up to what was happening. But if you look at their videos, they tell you what they're going to do,
Yeah, I know.
and you look at things like the great reset, as Klaus
Yeah.
Schwab would say, but he says COVID is a great opportunity to reset the this, that, and the other. And then when you look at what they want to do in the reset, yeah, currency is up there. Having a sort of a digital central bank controlled currency, and if they're going to blow up, it strikes me that if you knew that you had a house full of £30 million worth of currency, and
That would
that
be nice.
currency was going to be, yeah, wouldn't it? And that currency was going to be going out. It was going to be worthless in 3 months' time. So it's not going to be worth only 3 months because they're changing the currency. What would you do? Well, you'd just go out and blow it, wouldn't you? You just go, right,
Yeah.
okay, well, I may as well just go out and absolutely blow it. And it strikes me that's what every government in the world is doing at the moment,
Yeah.
which
Uh,
is a worry.
and it's a great worry. I mean, I, as individuals, all we can do is rail against it the best way we can. I mean, I have certain things I've started doing. It's the first day of November today, and I'm quite pleased that I set myself a goal at the beginning of October, which was to only deal in cash for the whole
Right.
month, which I did. Obviously, not for paying the mortgage and such like, but
Yeah.
every purchase I made out and about, I managed to use cash for, which I'm quite pleased about because it's not always possible. I had a couple of car parks in the summer, which I discovered that the machines no longer took coins and you had to pay by card.
Yeah.
And it was number plate recognition, which would have been awkward if I'd turned up there without my wallet and only had cash. Uh, but I think we're going to see it more and more. And you see it again. We talk about, well, we haven't mentioned it, but the nudge unit and nudging people and all this subliminal stuff everywhere. I noticed on the till in the supermarket I was in this morning, on the plastic screen, there was a sign saying, please be considerate and use cash where you can. No, sorry, the opposite.
Yeah.
Please be
Use a
considerate
card
and
reader.
use card where you can. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
why
Why
is
is that
that?
considered? Yes.
Yeah, but if
Absolutely.
you think back, if when you look at the pandemic, you could just you see signs all the time, like they raise the card limit from 30 to 45 to 100 for contactless, and
Yeah.
then there was the whole during the pandemic, use a card because cash is contaminated and dirty, and you see that agenda again being pushed. But I if digital ID is in and it's all done through the phone, nothing, no transaction that any of us ever make again will be private. And that it's not like, well, you can say, okay, well, I'm a law-abiding citizen, I don't do anything wrong. What have I got to worry about? But some people don't seem concerned. But I personally value my privacy, and I like the idea that I can walk out of my house without a phone, without a wallet, just with money in my pocket, and I can go to a market and I can choose the fruit and vegetables I want, loose, that haven't been sat in a warehouse. They've come from Covent Garden that morning, and I can go to a butcher, and I can choose meat that's come from somewhere local, and I can hand over my money and bring those things home and cook a meal from scratch, and nobody knows where I went. Nobody knows what I bought because that's my private business.
Exactly. And well, first of all, you shouldn't have to justify your going about your business as a free man. What I mean,
Yeah,
until 2 years ago, none of this was even considered. It was just done. But people say all the time, "Oh, well, you've already got." It's either the old Oh, well, I've had yellow fever and I've got a yellow fever card. I don't see what the problem is about a vaccine passport. We're obviously past, well, we are past understanding this is more than a vaccine pass or
Yeah,
proof of vaccine, but I don't think a lot of people are. But also, this, what have you got to hide? If you've got nothing to hide, then what's the problem? Now, I always found that quite difficult to argue against because it's quite a strong argument to say, when you actually try and form an argument, I found it difficult, other than to say, well, what's it got to do with you? It's my privacy. However, I think there is now a strong argument which people would accept, a lot of people would accept. 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, it was not potentially a criminal offence to consider that somebody born as a man with a penis is a man, if they call themselves a woman. Whereas now, if you were to call that person a woman, that would be a non-crime hate incident. You would be misgendering them, and it would be registered on your criminal record if it was reported, and you might not even know about it. Now, that, of course, criminal record will be one of the things that goes onto your ID, as will your social media score. So if you are rated by an algorithm to be a bad person because you have the wrong political beliefs for the time, then that too will go on to, perhaps then you're not allowed to, you haven't got the right travel, you're restricted on your travel because you're classified as being in some way not a good person. So
yeah.
what I'm saying is, it's all well and good saying, well, if you've got nothing to hide, or if you're not committing a crime, you've got no problem. Well, what if people invent crimes that until 2 years ago were just known to be a biological truth? I mean, I'm not going into that whole argument. But what I'm saying
No,
is, it's,
but
it was totally in contra. There was no
but
way of arguing against that a few
yeah,
years ago.
the point is that that crime, whatever it may be, once everybody is in the system, they can make anything that they want a crime. It can be a crime to buy this, say this, even think this.
Yeah,
Uh, we've seen all these tightening of there's the law they brought in Scotland where you could be prosecuted for things you say in your own home if someone happens to be there that finds it offensive. But this whole idea of social credit, well, as we know, it's advanced in China. But I mean, the thing you were saying there, to give a good example, there's an episode of Black Mirror called Nosedive,
right.
which portrays a kind of utopian future society where everything is rated via a social credit system. So, for the benefit of people who haven't seen it, I'll just give you a brief example without spoiling the plot if anyone wants to go away and watch it. Everybody's wandering around with their phone, and in the imagery on the program, they've all got a number above their head out of 5, in the same way that people would rate products on Amazon or TripAdvisor. And every single thing they do, interaction, people can press a button on their phone and rate the person. So if you go and buy a coffee, and the person behind the desk is all sweetness and light, you can upvote them or downvote them, and it will affect their score. And it affects every single interaction you have with anybody during that day. And there are things that happen which are quite disturbing. So even by associating with somebody with a lower score than you can bring your score down. So I guess that would be the equivalent of the class system, historical class system. You wouldn't want to people from higher class associating with the working classes. And in this example, there's a guy in the office who he's cheated on his partner or something like that, and his score's gone right down. And he's going around offering cakes to people because he's trying to get his score up. And the main character takes a cake, and suddenly her phone starts beeping because her score's going down. And it's all her other colleagues in the office have seen her taking this cake from this guy who's out of favour, and they're all voting her down.
That's
And once
really
we
good.
get to
Yeah.
that sort of scenario, and of course, the person that you buy the coffee from, all sweetness in light because they want to get you to uprate them, and it's just falseness.
Yes.
It's that sickly smile. I have encountered it in America, where with
Mm.
the tipping culture, with people who are overly attentive and it just feels false. Um, but the interesting thing about this episode as well was that at my stand in the park group, we got talking about this, and I was chatting to a lady there. And I said, "Oh yeah, you must go and watch this." And she said, "Oh, no, I will. It's really interesting." And then she came back the next Sunday, and she said, "Yeah, I watched it, and it was terrifying. But do you know what? I watched it with my 17-year-old daughter, who is always on Instagram and all the social media where everything's about likes." And she said, "My daughter thought it was a brilliant idea,
Yeah.
and she can't wait for the world to be like that." And I thought, that
That's
is
really depressing.
that is really depressing.
That's terrifying. I knew you were going to say that, because
Yeah,
the trouble is, and we were all the same. I remember having arguments. Well, not really arguments, but discussions with my father whenever Facebook came out first. I don't know how long ago now. Decade
yeah,
ago,
about
probably, was it
15
something like
years
that?
ago,
15
something
years.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah, and he would say, "I bloody hate this Facebook. What the hell is this all about?" And I'd say, "Well, I did get it then. I could see the intrusion on privacy and everything." But I
yeah,
said, "Well, the great thing is, Dad, it's a great way to get to customers if you've got a business, and if certainly if you're public facing."
yeah,
So it's free marketing effectively. You can get to customers. You've got word of mouth. You've got reviews. So if you're running a good business, it's a great way to expand your business for free. But of course, everything he said has now come to pass. Some of which I could foresee, but other
yeah,
stuff I didn't think it would be as bad. I think. That sounds absolutely. I will watch it. That sounds absolutely horrendous. The other thing, of course, which you mentioned, was your interaction with other people, which I think a lot of people miss out on. The fact that you get downgraded because you're mixing with the wrong people
yeah,
who might have the wrong beliefs and all the rest of it, and it does create this undercast. But that's already happening in terms of everyone's metadata. So everyone's phone
yeah,
with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and 3G, 4G, whatever it is that's on there, and it's got a 5G as well, of course. All of that information will be there'll be AI, because of course this couldn't have been done by people because there's so much information, but AI will enable all of this to be processed so that they'll know what you do every day,
yeah,
what shops you go to, who you happen to associate with, by accident or not, whether you go to a protest or not. They're
yeah.
already doing that in London. So if you ever go on a protest in London, you shouldn't take your phone with you, because
No,
they will be scraping all that information, all the metadata off your phone, so they'll know who you are, where you were, at what time, and before you know it, if somebody punched a policeman 30 meters or 30 feet away from where you were, you're suspect. So
yeah,
all of that's happening already. And then who do you email? Who do you phone? Who do they phone? And who do they email? And who do they know? And yes, huge network which is being recorded forever
yeah.
and will be used as part of your reason to be allowed on this planet.
And it's difficult to know how one can escape from it, because even if you decided to take an analog lifestyle, the facial recognition and CCTV and everything everywhere, and the number plate recognition, it's very hard to go anywhere or do anything without them being able to track you down.
Mm.
I think you need to go and live on some remote island or in the Highlands of Scotland or somewhere. But yeah, it's hard to see really how we can stop it. I think the best we can do is try and slow it down.
Well, yes. It's happened so fast. That is the other thing.
Yeah,
You're saying about your acquaintance's 17-year-old daughter,
yeah,
and I totally get that. But I have to say, to some extent, we're all guilty of it, because it
Yes.
is convenient, isn't it, to have these apps and things. I'm a bit of a
Oh,
techie
yeah.
sort of geek anyway, but I was just thinking a few months ago now. I transferred my bank from one of the big five, and I moved it to one of the new phone banks. I think it's Monzo actually. So I bank with Monzo, and they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. It's all on my phone. I can see when a transaction happens. It pings when I get paid. It pings when I send money out. When direct debit's clear, I can print off a statement. I can set up a direct debit all just by face recognition, and it's
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic. But I can only take out £200 a month in cash.
Wow.
Otherwise, I get charged. Like a
So they're
credit
dissuading
card.
you from using cash.
Yes. And a few months ago, I realised. At first, it didn't bother me because I rarely use cash because I was using credit cards or phone or whatever else.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when all this happened, I suddenly started thinking, well, hang on a minute. So I'm now thinking, can I open an account with does the post office still do an account, or
Yeah.
I just want to go completely analog now? But
You're right though that we are all guilty of it. I mean, I've always embraced technology. My attitude has completely changed in the last to so many things in the last few years. I mean, I mentioned that I write these novels. I The third book in my series, which I wrote about 6 7 years ago, is set about 20 or 30 years in the future, and I look back now at what I wrote, and I'm championing driverless electric cars and robots doing everything for everybody. And, isn't the future wonderful? And all this leisure time, we could all go to the pub and get pissed and no one has to drive the car or just take us home and all this stuff. And I'm looking back at it now and I'm thinking, was I really that naive? It was only 6 years ago that I wrote this.
yeah,
Um, no, I'm not one for revise. I would never go back and revise anything that I've written. I don't think because um, that's how I felt at the time. But certainly, I think my books that are set in the future are going to have a slightly more dystopian angle on them in the future. But no,
well,
I mean, I was always at the forefront of technology. The computers in the 80s and um, whatever gadget. I was always, oh, look, the latest gadget, got to get a tablet, got to get this, got to do this. Oh, look, you can do this online now. And I remember, first getting the internet and, it was like, wow, we can do anything. This is the future. And do you remember those early days of the internet, how wonderful it was?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Totally. I mean, I think the first time I ever used the internet, I went online, didn't really know at all what I was doing. I thought, well, where shall I go? What shall I do? So I went to the White House, of all places, to
yeah.
their website, and I couldn't believe. People find this hard. Younger people certainly find this hard to believe now. The White House webpage came up, and I thought, wow, I'm kind of in the White House.
Yeah.
And there was a forum or something, and it was all very. I didn't know what I was doing, and I ended up getting in an argument with somebody. So that's the internet for you straight away. First time I was on it, I had an argument with somebody. But it was just so weird, and as you say, it's developed tremendously.
Well,
But
it's technology is becoming a monster, and rather than freeing us, it's potentially enslaving us. But then it has provided opportunities. I mean, there is increasing globalization, as we've discussed, but it has given opportunities to independent content creators. So I don't publish through a traditional publisher. I do everything online. I deal with a cover artist who lives in Brazil, who does all my artwork for me. I've got another lady somewhere else who does my proofreading, and I can publish my work on independent sites and you've obviously through the big players like Amazon and iTunes and people for audiobooks. So I do use the big companies, but it has given me that opportunity. It's given independent filmmakers and content creators who want to make videos an opportunity through YouTube and other places, and also musicians who, um, what all these people, musicians, filmmakers, writers like myself, all have in common, is because we don't produce content that fits the mold. We would never have got through the front door of
Yep.
the old gatekeepers. So
And as you say,
it's a positive.
it is. Yeah.
I don't know how much, whether I'll be able to continue making a living like this for the rest of my life. Fingers crossed I will. But I wouldn't have had that opportunity in the old world.
Yeah, I mean, as well, from a business perspective, so much can be automated and what have you, as you say, and you can reach out to. Oh, I use the word. I hate reach out. I won't say reach out again. You can speak to people from here, there, and everywhere to get the skills that you need to import.
Yeah.
But also, it's scalable and low overhead, and also variable overhead. So, from a business perspective, it's fantastic, isn't it?
And you are your own boss. So, I mean, I think many of us on our side of the argument, I said, are independently minded. And one of the things I hated about the corporate world was that I felt so stifled by, if you came up with an innovation or a good idea that was good for the company, often it would just be stifled, or someone else would take the credit, or you wouldn't, it wouldn't do you any good. You wouldn't get any benefit. And working for yourself, and you sit there and you think, well, how can I do this? How can I sell this? It's all down to you. And it's a great way to live. I just hope that we will continue to have those opportunities, because, as you know, I mean, you've seen the increasing censorship on YouTube and other platforms. Are we going to reach a point where that gets as bad as the old media, and there's certain things you simply can't say or do? I hope not.
I think it's getting there. I mean, YouTube. I absolutely love YouTube. I think it's brilliant. I think it's the most. At first, when it was all cat videos and things, I didn't.
Yeah.
I thought, well, what is this really? It's just a load of rubbish. But you can access so much now on YouTube. But the problem, as you say, is that they are becoming so censorious that it's
I mean, many of the channel
platform.
When I became really awake to what was happening with the pandemic back in sort of April, May, it was going off and looking elsewhere on YouTube that enabled me to discover things like UK Column News. It was where I found James Dellingpole, and several other things like the Guff Stream and all these other things that I found. And I would not have gone to look for those, I don't think, had all this not happened last year. And in a way, I mean, I want to try and put, as we come towards the end of this, put a positive spin. I think there are a lot of people now. I know it's easy for us to think everybody's still asleep and watching the BBC, but a lot of people have gone out and found this other media that wouldn't have otherwise. Yes. And I think that's because they've pushed too hard, and more people are questioning, and they are looking for other content. And if they push it off YouTube, they move it on to Odyssey or Rumble, there will always be places to go. And
yes,
I think.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's good that you're you have putting a positive spin on it, and I don't wish to completely wee on it, but my only concern there is they've recognised that, which is why they're stamping on everything so much.
Yeah.
And the online harms bill, which is being brought in the UK, and which is clearly being seeded, disgustingly, on the back of Sir David Amos's recent murder. The fact that they were linking an Islamic attack to mean tweets on Twitter, radicalising people. And I think that's pretty blatant sort of propaganda aimed at getting public support for more censorship, which is terrible. But and
Well,
of course
maybe
that's
we will.
law. So
Maybe at some point we will have to go more analog. I mean, a lot of what I do now, there's the stand in the park. There is the third Wednesday. Uh, even meeting in pubs, having conversations. I mean, if all the communications they talk about an internet cyber attack and it all being taken down, I mean that's often. But maybe we need to go back to something really old fashioned. All invest in some CB radios or some good old fashioned stuff that's not easy to track.
well, funnily enough, I was looking at CB radios just the other day on
Yeah,
Amazon, and you can pick them up for next to nothing. But I read a few reviews, and there was a few people because when I was a kid, when I was about
yeah,
16, 17, 18, that sort of age, CB radios were really big, and
yeah,
we all had them in our cars for a couple of
yeah.
years,
I
probably.
remember that.
And it was very, very popular. Well, apparently, there's obviously a few people of my sort of age have been and bought a CB radio, and they were saying it's great and it works. It was in the review. It's
Yeah,
great and it works, but there's nobody to talk to.
yeah, that's true.
But
Or
yeah, perhaps that's what we're going to do. Perhaps we're all going to get back on.
or walkie talkies or anyway. I mean, if things did get really bad, we would have to stay in touch with each other.
Yeah.
But we do know places to go. I mean, I know that the photo you saw, the Malvern Hills. I know there's a place I can go on Saturday morning if I can get there,
Mhm.
where other people will be. I know there's people on a Sunday morning, and where they'll be, people on a Wednesday evening. So I think it's very important for people to get out and make those contacts in real life.
Yes.
And I'm not quite sure what the situation with landline telephones is. There was talk of them being switched off at one point completely. But a lot of people don't use them, do they?
No. No.
But it's what going back to that thing about filling in a form. I want to put my home phone number on the form because I know they can't send text messages on it, or they would have to actually phone me.
Well, exactly. I mean, this is a problem because my mother is of an age where she's never really used a mobile phone, and
Yeah,
it's always flat and it's always sitting in a kitchen drawer somewhere. So she's now at the point where when she does her banking or when she orders something on Amazon or whatever, there's this two level verification thing, 2-step verification. And
yeah,
she has to have a mobile phone. And as you say, so I end up using my mobile phone. So
yeah.
I'm constantly getting random texts with security codes and things because she can't work it out on hers. But
Yeah, that two-step verification thing is a nuisance, but um, again, it defeats the purpose because I've got it on mine, but I've got my phone linked to my computer. So when I put the thing in on the computer and it sends the message, it pops up on the screen anyway. So
I've had Apple verifications. I've gone into some sort of Apple thing, and it's all Google, and it's sent the verification to the whatever I'm using. So I access this on my phone, and then what it should do, as you say, is it should send it to your iPad or your computer,
yeah,
something that's already registered. And for some bizarre reason, it pops up on my phone. I think, well, that doesn't really achieve much. It's on
yeah.
my phone. But yeah, I see the reason for fraud control. But the problem with all of this, a lot of people I've seen on Twitter have said, well, good luck trying to control me. I just won't have a smartphone. Ha.
Well,
But
it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's almost impossible not to have one.
exactly, that's the problem, isn't it? I don't think
mean,
that they've thought that
no.
through, really.
The only I bet mine is sitting on my desk at the moment here, but I don't use it hardly at all. The only reason I ever take it out with me is because my kids. I've got two boys. They're 14 and 11, so they're old enough I could leave them in the house for a couple of hours to go out shopping or go out for a drink, but they need to be able to call me.
Yeah.
So if I didn't have dependents or people, I don't always take it. Like they're at school today, so I went out this morning to do some shopping, and I didn't take it with me because I didn't
Hmm.
need to. But how long will it be until you know not taking your phone out of the house will be the equivalent of going out naked? You literally cannot go out without it.
It's yeah. I mean, funnily enough, on that very subject, and this is a long time ago. This must
Mm.
be I don't know how long ago, but a few years after we got used to basically going to a business meeting. You're going to meet somebody in a motorway service area, for example.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll meet you halfway at so and so. And it used to be when I first started work, you had to set a specific time, place, and what do you look like, or what will you be
yeah,
carrying a bag, or so. Otherwise, it would be a totally wasted journey. And then over time, of course, you have your phone. You just go right. Okay, I'll see you there at 12. Yeah, okay. And you get there and you ring, and you find each other. And one
yeah,
day, I had that really easygoing arrangement, drove to the Medway service area, and then realised, or the hotel or whatever, then realised I hadn't got my phone with me. And I did feel naked because you suddenly think, oh my God,
yeah.
well, how am I going to, I don't know what they look like, or. So, yeah, we're very reliant on them. But as you say, I think more than anything, it's the metadata, it's the apps, it's the information that they are collating,
But
and the
we,
restrictions they can put on your life.
yeah, and it's crept up on us. Like a lot of things, like the vaccine passport just for the vaccine, or the mobile phone was just a phone initially, but more and more things have been added to it, and everyone's it's our phone, it's our camera, it's everything.
Yeah, yeah. I think somebody ought to try and. I know people are doing it, but it would be great if somebody could explain by example, a bit like that Black Mirror episode, the nosedive. I'm gonna
Yeah,
watch that. How it works, as you say, that the only problem is there are going to be a large percentage of the population that are probably just going to go, "Oh wow, that's cool. I like that,"
yeah,
which is really, really quite depressing.
because
I
before we were awake and technology was coming along, we I said before that's what my attitude would have been.
Yeah, yeah.
Before, but I never thought about the implications and what's happened with COVID and everything else that's been pushed on us. As I say, it's changed my attitude, and my hope is that other people have gone through that same process at the same time. And one of the reasons why I think people are is because the pushing has become too hard, and it is relentless. And it was the same with COVID, climate change, and the various other issues we talked about. I believe that there must be a point where the law of diminishing returns sets in. Because I mean, I've never, I don't want to go deeply into the climate change thing again, but I've always been quite skeptical about that.
Mhm.
That climate change is a natural thing, but in terms of environmental concerns, things like recycling our bottles and paper and all that, I think most people would have been on board with that. So we'd sort out our rubbish and do this stuff, and people would say concerns about environmental disasters would happen, um, and people would be genuinely concerned. But when you get to the point, and I do occasionally dip into the TV news to see what they're saying, or the TV in general. I know a lot of people don't even have a license now, but every single thing you see on these channels, whether it be a soap, the news, the adverts, it's just bang, bang, bang in your face all the time. The same message over and over and over again. Now, maybe with the other type of people that we talked about earlier, that psychological effect drums it into their brain and takes them on board. But I think with a lot of other people, it's you get to the point where I'm absolutely bloody sick of this. And I'm going to be less supportive of the cause because you're starting to annoy me now. And I think a lot of people must be getting to that point.
I think so. Well, I think the Matrix red pill, blue pill thing
Yeah,
is the perfect analogy for because once once you've taken the red pill, but you cannot unsee it, can you?
No.
Once you've seen something, turns you onto it, and once you've seen it, you see it in pretty much everything,
Yeah.
and it's so obvious as well. And you just think,
Yeah.
well, how on earth did I not see this? But
Well, was it always there and I didn't see it, or has it got worse? I think there's
yes,
probably a
yeah,
bit of both. I think it
yes, I
was
probably is.
always there, but it wasn't as blatant as it is now.
Yes, and of course, because things like, if you only had 4 or 5 newspapers and 3 or 4 TV channels, then because
As
I
we
mean
did.
that 1970s film Network. Do you remember that? I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. With I forgot who was the actor in that. He has a nervous breakdown effectively on TV, and I think he might blow his brains, or he
I
threatens to blow his
can't
brains out.
recall that, but I've seen other films like Falling Down with Michael Douglas, which is a
Yes,
similar sort of I've had enough of the system.
it's very
So
similar to that.
similar idea. Yeah.
But it's a bit more cerebral, because
Yeah.
what he's actually saying is network news is effectively what we're talking about, and
Yeah.
he's saying the same. He's saying network news, it's total bull,
Yeah.
and it's all about commercial interests and pushing a narrative and ignoring what's happening and all the rest of it. And he just stands up one day on his news show. He actually becomes a little bit like a very, very angry Neil Oliver, and starts becoming a bit of a guru, and
Yeah.
everyone tunes in to listen to him. And he always tells it as it is, and everybody agrees. And he becomes ironically, he becomes a star, because his ratings go up, and then he's kind of under pressure to always be a bit like sort of Piers Morgan, if you like, to be that sort of always say something outrageous so that he can get the ratings going up. And
Yeah.
then he basically bucks the trend. He realizes what's happening, and I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And he starts saying on the show, stop listening to what I'm saying, open the window at home and yell it out the window. And
Yeah.
one of the execs is there and suddenly starts hearing all these people yelling out the window. So I think, yes, it has been around for certainly 40, 50 years, and probably before that, probably 150 years ago, the Times was the paper of record, and everybody believed everything that was in it. So I suppose it's always been there, but it's just harder to keep a lid on it now, isn't it? With all
It
these
is
different
because
sources.
there's a more globalist nature and almost a single agenda now, and it it seemed like the papers were competing against each other and taking different points of view in the past. Maybe that was an illusion, I don't know, but certainly with the narratives now, it's like they've got everybody on board. The papers, as we know, because it's been talked about by others, that they are financially dependent on the people funding them, and so the papers, you've got all of the celebrities, you've got pretty much every institution you could name is all pushing exactly the same message. And the fact that there is no discussion and no dissent, that's a massive red flag to me, and that certainly was one of the things that would have woken me up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Jason, I think we've kind of gone round the circle there, so it's almost a perfect place to bring it to an end. Before we do, though,
Yes.
I just wanted to. So you're successful published writer that is making a living, which is a fantastic way to make a living, I think, writing. My brother writes, but he doesn't
Yeah.
make a living doing it, unfortunately. But how would we get to see, if we wanted to read some of your works, where's the best place to go?
Okay. Well, my series of novels is under the umbrella of the Time Bubble, and there are 11 of them, soon to be 12, and you can get them via audiobook on various platforms such as iTunes and Audible. Paperbacks, I'm loath to say this, but the easiest way to get them and most economical way to get them is through Amazon. I'm not selling them through my own website at the moment because it's not cost effective, but you can also order them in independent bookshops if you go in and ask.
Okay.
And then obviously there are the ebooks, for Kindle, which is where I sell most of my copies, to be honest.
Right.
But in the first place, I would say go to the Amazon website and have a look, or
Okay.
go to
Well, I'm
my
gonna.
or go to my website. Oh, and also actually on my because I do other bits of writing as well. There's a short story I put up on my website a little while ago, which I called "The Meat Elite," which it was a little dystopian tale of a waitress who hadn't eaten meat for 2 years because it was banned. This is in the future, but she's at a sort of government meeting, and they're all sitting there laughing and eating fillet steaks and such like, which was quite an amusing little tale. I'm thinking of doing more of these sort of short stories based on things that have been going on. But my website is jasonayres.co.uk, so it's quite easy to find.
Fine. Okay. Well, I will put those links as well in the description under this podcast, both on YouTube and it'll also go up on Rumble and onto the podcast and onto the website as well, to my website. So
That's great.
so everybody, if you are interested in delving into the time bubble, obviously start at the first novel. Is it a episodic? Do you have to start at the beginning to see?
They not necessarily. They are designed to be a series, but you can also read them standalone. And the first novel, I often suggest to people that you might not want to start with that one because it tracks a group of people through their whole lives. And the people in the first book, they are all teenagers, and it has a rather teen feel to it, and it can make people believe that the entire series is a teen series. Had I been planning it out better from the start, I probably wouldn't have done it that way. But if you wanted to read a standalone one, I would suggest going for book 7 in the series, which is called Midlife Crisis, which is about a middle-aged man getting the opportunity to go back and live 6 days of his life over again, revisiting, his teenage years and settling a few scores. And
Wouldn't we all like to do that?
I think that's my personal favourite of the ones that I've written. So,
well, that certainly appeals to me. Yeah, and I seem to have a midlife crisis about every 7 years. So
yes,
so,
and no one less illustrious than one of our Delingpole friends is reading that at the moment, and he gave me some very nice feedback on it on Saturday, so I was quite pleased about that.
Oh, well, I might well invest in that then, and we could talk about it when we meet, hopefully in December.
Yes, I'll look forward to that in Ledbury. It's always a good night. I would say if anybody that's listening here that is, well, in the area or even not in the area, we had a chap, I don't know if you've come across him, called Michael Livesley, who does the Nice Things podcast. He came all the way down from Liverpool a couple of months ago to it. So we get people from far and wide, and it is just wonderful to be having a few beers in a place where everybody else is on board with what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's right. Well, I spoke to Michael actually on here, so I'm looking forward to it. There's quite a lot of people I feel I know quite well now that I have never met, so it would be nice to meet up.
Oh, you should get Michael on here. He's always entertaining.
We had him on one of the early ones, actually. One of the very early ones.
Maybe you did. Maybe I thought. Yes, I may already have heard it.
Right, it's possible. I mean, there's so many podcasts. I say there's more people that have podcasts than don't have podcasts these days, I think. But
well, I'm thinking of starting one myself, but it's just finding the time to do it on top of everything else. So,
well, it is. I mean, I've really enjoyed it, and as I say, they always tend to go just over the 2 hour. We're about the 2 hour mark, but I think. I think a lot of people just listen to podcasts with them in the background, and they'll take something from some and they'll not take something from others, and that's how I deal with podcasts. And most of them I'll listen all the way through, and every now and again you get one that's not really addressing something you're interested in, and you'll turn it off. But I think they're a great way of communicating.
You get to know the people that are on them and interact, and then you meet them in real life. I mean, I met Simon Roberts and Hector from the Guff stream up at James Dellingpole's live event a few weeks ago, and people turn up to these things at Ledbury or wherever, and you realize, oh, you're the guy that does that podcast, and it's just so wonderful making these connections in real life.
No, I'm looking forward to it, really am. But fantastic. Well, Jason, thank you very much for your time. Good to talk to you. And
thank you.
I'm particularly. I think the Vax Passport digital ID thing. We are at one on that. I mean, that
is my number one issue for certain.
Yes. Yeah, it is a massive concern. I don't think enough people fully appreciate. But anyway, yes, I will. I'm going to go and make myself a cup of tea and try and buck myself up so that the dystopian future that seems to be looming doesn't feel quite so close.
Well, let's just hope it doesn't arrive for another 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, that'd do me. That'd be nice.
Until we're not bothered anymore.
Yeah, we won't know what's going on anyway. If we're even here. But yeah, no, that's brilliant. Yeah. Thank you, Jason. Really appreciate your time. So that's Jason Ayres, nowadays writer, previously market researcher. Gulfstream sounds like Gulfstream aficionado and Third Wednesday attendee, and also Stand in the Park, I think you said. So
yes,
not alone in any of those. A lot of my other guests have been involved in all of those things. Jason, thank you very much for your time, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much. Bye.